Hello Year 10, you've made it to the end of the unit, almost summer holidays. Just one more thing to do for us, you need to write your essay. The focus of your essay is going to be on the theme of power in Macbeth. So the first thing I'd like you to do is just copy down the essay title, which is Discuss how Shakespeare presents the theme of power in his play Macbeth. Now double check that you spelled Shakespeare correctly. In the previous video that you watched, I gave you this example question: how is Lady Macbeth presented throughout the play? And I gave you an example structure. I said that you needed to come up with your first point and think of evidence from across the play to support it, a second, a third point, a conclusion with your overall impressions or Shakespeare's overall intentions, and then, if you had time, my top tip was to go back and write an introduction. This is the same framework that we're going to be using today in order to plan your essay for next lesson. Before you answer any question, you need to understand what the question is asking you to write about. And you need to identify the key language in this question. In our question, the key word is power. So the first thing I'd like you to do is write down what that word means. Not necessarily in relation to Macbeth, but in general terms. What does that word power mean? So pause the video and write down a couple of notes. You may have written down that power has to do with your position or your status or your title. I'd like you to pause the video again and think about how this idea of power might link to the play. Think about characters or events. You might also be able to link in any background information, any context to do with this. The next one is strength. This might be physical or mental strength. By mental strength, I mean someone that maybe is very focused and is unable to be manipulated or swayed by anyone else. And physical strength means in your body you are strong. So think about now how this idea of power might be explored in the play. The next one is respect and love. Is there any power in those emotions or those sort of relationships? Again, pause the video and write down some ideas in relation to the play. Next we have control and dominance. Once again, pause the video and see how this idea of power might link to themes or people in the play. And finally, we have the supernatural. Once again, see how you might be able to link this notion of power to the play, either at events or people. Now let's look at key characters that might link to this theme of power. Spend a couple of minutes now writing down a couple of characters that come to mind from the play when you think of power. You should have a few characters written down, and we're just going to go through them now. Now, the main player, Macbeth, I'd be very surprised if you didn't all write him down. If you haven't, pop his name down and pause the video and write down why you think he is powerful and when you think he is powerful in the play. Okay, you should have a few notes written down for Macbeth. I want you to do the same for each of the other characters I'm going to go through. So the same for Lady Macbeth. How is she powerful? When is she powerful? Banquo, the witches, Malcolm, Macduff, and King Duncan. Remember him? So for each of these characters, spend a few minutes writing down how they might be powerful and when specifically in the play are they powerful. Now let's look at how you'd like to structure your essay. You can do this in a couple of ways. The first way is to go through character by character. So you might want to make your first point about a specific character. So for example, you might want to talk about Macduff. You could make a point about the fact that when in Act 4 he leaves his home in Fife and his entire family are slaughtered, he is pretty powerless, as are his family. However, he regains this power by the end of the play when he himself kills the tyrant Macbeth in the final act. Or you can make broader points and think about power as someone who has dominance over someone else, someone who is controlling and manipulative. So for here, you might talk about how Lady Macbeth has control over her husband, but you also might want to talk about how Macbeth has control over other people in the play, how he organises the murder of Banquo, how he murders the king, and how he becomes perhaps more assertive in his manner. And you might make your third point in a similar way, talking about the power of the supernatural in this play. And here you would link to the witches and how the effect that their prophecies have on Macbeth. You could also link with the supernatural to the hallucinations that Macbeth has, but also Lady Macbeth and how she is sometimes considered the fourth witch. Now it's time for you to decide what your 3 points are going to be. Write down 3 subheadings, first point, second point, third point, and now go back through your notes about power and collect quotations that support your point. Make sure your quotations are nice and short, and make sure that at least some of your quotations has some devices that you could comment on. This will make your analysis of the meaning that Shakespeare is trying to convey stronger. There's an example planned paragraph here on your screen. You might also want to consider any contextual points that you might be able to make. So this means what was going on at the time that Shakespeare was writing this play, and how might that link to the point that you want to make about power. The bit that's underlined now is an example point about context. Pause the slide and go over your notes. Spend 15 to 20 minutes collecting quotations. Aim for 3 to 4 quotations per point that you make. You might have notes saved on your computer or written down in your notebook, or you can go over the video about key quotations linking to power and select the quotations from there. Make sure you have 3 points fully planned before moving on to the next slide. You also need to remember that this is a play, so make sure that you're using the correct language in your essays. Remember to comment on stage directions. Stage directions is any information that is given to the actor and is usually presented in brackets on the page. Remember that the characters are having conversations with each other, or they might be talking to themselves, in which case it might be a soliloquy. Think about the tone of voice that Shakespeare may have wanted his characters to say something, and also think about the pace. Remember, we are the audience, we aren't the reader. There are acts and scenes, not chapters, and if we're being really picky, we'd refer to Shakespeare as the playwright, not the writer. And finally, here's the success criteria which lists what you should include in your essays. Now, in a previous video, I asked you to create your own success criteria based on some model answers. So it might well be that you already have these written down somewhere, but make sure you've got all of the items on the list. It's written down somewhere now so that you can refer to it whilst you're writing your essay. So the first one is quite an obvious one. Just make sure that you are actually answering the questions. This is a question on power. Make sure that every point that you make links to that theme. Make sure that you are using subject terminology throughout your essay. So this refers to the previous slide where we're talking about the play as a play, talking about stage directions and soliloquies, but also talking about the devices that Shakespeare uses. So is he creating a metaphor, for example? Is he using repetition? You also need to make sure that you're selecting evidence or quotations from across the play. So this means that you're talking about the beginning, the middle, and the end of the play throughout your essay. You need to make sure that you are developing your explanations. So this might be that you're giving alternative interpretations of language and character. So using words like however, alternatively, or developing a point using words like moreover. Remember to structure your essay using paragraphs. This should be really easy to do if you're going to be using the structure, the plan structure that we did together previously in this video. Make sure that every new point you make, you move on to a new paragraph, so leave a line. If you forget to leave a line, you can just put 2 lines like this to show whoever's marking your work that there was meant to be a paragraph there. You need to think about Shakespeare's intention. So what did Shakespeare want us to think about a specific event or character's behaviour? Thinking about how the audience may react to that event or that character, but also thinking about different types of audiences. So we're a modern audience, and therefore we may react differently to someone like Lady Macbeth than a contemporary audience, the audience that will be watching the play when Shakespeare was writing. This also is linked to context, because you're thinking about what was happening at the time to influence a contemporary audience's opinions and reactions. Finally, looking at single word analysis. So this just means zooming in on keywords and unpicking their meaning in great detail. This success criteria or checklist is very similar to the one that you would need writing an essay on poetry. So there shouldn't be too much new information here. Make sure you have this checklist visible when you're writing your essay, and use it to proofread your essay when you've finished. And that's it. Well done, Year 10. All you need to do now is write your essay. Make sure you are saving your lovely plans somewhere recognisable on your computers or somewhere safe in your house so that you know where it is when you have to go and write your essay. Remember, all of the videos that UE have created for you over this term for this unit are still available to you on YouTube. So if you need to go over any characters or any themes or anything re-explained to you, it's all there for you to look at. So make sure that you do that if you're unsure of anything before your essay. Best of luck, Year 10.